Blog Talk Radio.
Friday afternoon. Welcome to Desperate House Witches. I'm Raina Sparks, you don't have to be. Desperate House Witches is not a G, PG, or even an R-rated show. So, bad language, bodily function, dirty talk of any kind might offend you. This is not the show for you. But you know that's why you tune in, my desperados. I know you. Desperate House Witches is brought to you by the amazingly wicked one herself, the incredible Dorothy Morrison. Please check out www.wickedwitchstudios.com for all of your witching needs. That's www.wickedwitchstudios for all of your witching needs. Oh, my goodness, what a week it has been, my darlings. But before I bring on my guest, I want to remind everybody that I will be speaking at Mystic South July 14th through 16th in beautiful Atlanta at the Crown Plaza at Ravinia. So check it out. Get your room booked. And if you're local, get your tickets. Do it. I'm expecting to see everybody there at Mystic South. It's going to be a great conference. Speaking of Mystic South, my guest today is also going to be at Mystic South. You know him. You love him. He is a writer. He is a blogger. He is fantastic. He has written Paganism in Depth. So he's a Llewellyn author, and he is also a blogger on Patheos. The amazing John Beckett. Hello, my friend.
Wow, it's going to be hard to live up to all that.
Yeah, you'll manage. Have you been,
good
John?
To be here.
It's been such a long time since we spoke. It's been a year.
It has. Well, it's been busy. So I've been blogging and teaching classes, and trying to keep going on the paying job for a couple more years. And things have been busy, but generally good.
Yeah, that's good. So, John, you're also speaking at Mystic South. Tell the folks what you're going to be talking about there.
Well, I have two presentations, and they're both going to be on Friday. The first one is a brand new presentation for this year. It's called Magic Difficult Times. And if you're familiar with Hunter S. Thompson, the Gonzo journalist, he famously said, "When the going gets weird, the weird turn pro." And our world has gotten so weird over the past several years, and it's time to turn pro. And by that I don't mean how you make a living. I mean how seriously we take our spiritual practice, and especially our magical practice, because the world is getting more complicated, but we have tools other people don't. We have tools that, other people choose to ignore, choose to pretend don't exist, and we need to learn to use those tools to our full advantage. So this first presentation is going to look at some concepts and strategies and practice that help us use our magic to protect ourselves and also to build meaningful and happy lives. And then in the afternoon, I'm going to do a presentation titled Exorcising Toxic Religion from Your Soul. And this is So as people who've read my blog for very long know, I grew up in a fundamentalist Christian church, and it really messed me up. And it took me a long time to work through that, to exorcise the tentacles of that toxic religion from my soul. I stopped accepting what they settled for at a very early age, but when you're told something over and over again, particularly when you're a child, that stays with you. It doesn't just go away. There are ways that we can exercise principles from our psyche, and this is how I did it. It's not a ritual. It's not therapy. If you need therapy, go find therapy. I'm a druid, not a psychologist. But it is a process that I have used and have helped others to use to put the toxic religion behind us and move on into the religion, into the spirituality and the magic that we're called to follow, that we want to follow.
Interesting. So let me ask you this, John. The tools that you use and that you will be teaching in this presentation when you do it at Mystic South, is this also something that can be used, the toxic scripts that we are given as children, not just from a religious standpoint, but just from some of the poison things that some of us are told as children, especially those of us who were abused children?
It certainly can. And again, I want to emphasize this is not therapy. This is no substitute for therapy. But it can help you do the spiritual things that you need that will supercharge your therapy and really help you. What I like to tell people is the only cure for a bad experience is a good experience. You can't erase what happened. You can't undo what happened. What you can do is to replace that. You can replace those bad experiences. You can crowd out those bad experiences with good experiences. And that for me has made all the difference in the world.
No, I think that would be very helpful for a lot of us, because a lot of us who wind up at the door of paganism and witchcraft and the various offshoots, I think a lot of us are looking for empowerment where empowerment or power was taken away from us, especially through indoctrination during childhood. So I think this sounds very intriguing and I think could be beneficial. Again, this is not traditional therapy. John does not claim to be any kind of therapist, but these are just tools that folks might find helpful. I want to reemphasize that. But I'm very much looking forward to hearing more about that.
I did this one at Austin Witch Fest back in March, and it seemed to go over very well. So got a couple of tweaks based on some feedback I got after that, but I'm really excited about talking about this again because it's something that's important to me.
Absolutely. No, I think it's wonderful, and I'm looking forward to it. John, you wanted to talk today about high magic and the era of high magic. What exactly does that mean? So when a lot of people in the pagan and magical community talk about high magic, they're talking about ceremonial magic, grimoire magic. That's not what this is. When I say we're living in an era of high magic, I'm saying we're living in an era of high magical intensity, where there's a lot of magic in the air, a lot of magic in the environment. There are more people working magic today than ever before in the history of humanity. And we can say that simply because look at the population. If you look at how the population has grown, particularly since the beginning of the 20th century, you don't have to, your concentration of magical practitioners doesn't have to grow at all. Just if it stays the same, then more people are doing more magic. That's more magic out in there. So what I like to call the currents of magic, the
the natural flow of magic through the world, through the universe, that seems to be getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And so this is a golden time for magic and witchcraft. People talk about golden ages always in the past. And we have this idea that we're living in an era of disenchantment, and there used to be a time when people talked to the fairies and witches lived in the forest and magic was real, but that doesn't happen anymore. Well, the guy by the name of Jason Josephson Storm, who's a anthropologist, and he wrote a book a few years ago titled The Myth of Disenchantment, and he showed pretty conclusively that this happens in every generation. Every generation whines about, the magic is gone, and then their magical experiences become the golden age for the future generation. And he chases that all the way back to Chaucer in the 13th century. So we're not living in an era of disenchantment. We're living in a very enchanted age. Books whose mere possession could have got you burned at the stake 400 years ago are now delivered to your doorstep in a matter of days, translated into English. If you're looking for, if you're looking for a magical teacher, some of my some of the people even just a bit older than me who talked about how hard it was to find a magical teacher in the 50s and 60s. You want a magical teacher? Go on the internet. You're going to find somebody, either somebody like me who teaches remotely, or somebody who's teaching in person. Now, you may not find a teacher in every tradition, 2 miles from your house, but instruction is available. Magical groups are available. This is the golden age of magic and witchcraft, and it's a great time to be practicing, and let's take advantage of this.
Yeah, but you have to understand, it doesn't necessarily feel like it's such a great time, and I think the idea of disenchantment is coming from outside sources, of course, as it usually does when it's affecting a large group. And I think the inherent fear of how the country has changed seems to have a very heavy burden on those of us who are practitioners, because it feels like we're trying to tackle a lot of things politically, for example, because that is affecting everything around us. What are your thoughts about how to use magic to combat the negativity and the fear? Because the fear, you just mentioned the fact that the books we had wanted that we couldn't get our hands on, now we can have delivered to our door. But in places, for example, like Florida, where they're trying to eliminate such books, are we fearful because it seems like we're reverting backwards, or is it that we're fearful because we're afraid that we don't have any control to change the potential outcome? What are your thoughts on that?
We're fearful because we have, again, people, and I think you and I are about the same age, we've lived in an era of amazing progress with the civil rights movement and the women's movement and the push for LGBTQ rights, and we assumed that this was progress, and we were just going to keep going onward and upward, and history says that it never works that way. History says it's two steps forward and 1 step back, and sometimes it's 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. And I will be honest, I have misread the reaction to progress I thought we were much further along than we were, and a couple of my gay friends have said, oh no, you don't see what we see. And now I'm seeing what they see, though certainly not to that extent. Yeah, there are people who want to take the country back to the 1950s, if not back to the 18th. So it makes us more fearful. At the same time, Peter Gray said that witchcraft is the recourse of the dispossessed. And then after the Dobbs ruling last year, Heather Green had a column that said how to make a million witches with one court decision.
Yeah, true.
Witchcraft, and why would you bother with magic if you can get something with ordinary means? Like I said, if you want a hamburger, you can summon a demon and try to get him to bring it to you, but it's a lot simpler to just go drive through McDonald's. Magic is the tool. Magic is the tool of the people who are powerless, who are not powerless, people who are deprived of means of ordinary power.
Right.
So, magic's the tool of people who are deprived of ordinary powers, and so now is the You still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. I have somebody calling in on my line. This is the time to be practicing more. This is the time to be practicing our magic. Now, you asked the question, what can we do?
Right.
I have found that big spells to do major political workings are not particularly effective.
Right.
It's like working magic against a hurricane. You can be the most powerful witch in the state, but that hurricane is more powerful than you are. 70 million people are more powerful than a handful of witches. What magic can do very reliably, though, is to help each of us navigate life where we are, to protect ourselves and our families, to maintain our spiritual practice and keep our connections to our gods and our ancestors and the spirits around us who support us, to help make sure that we bring in the things that we need, that we connect with the people that we need to, so we can live good lives in spite of the Ron DeSantises of the world.
See, normally what I hear from folks is there's and no problem on this, but there's a lot of folks who like to try to work in big groups. My problem in doing stuff in big groups is that I sometimes find that energy is scattered and people have different outcomes that they are envisioning, and when you have folks with different goals in mind, even though they may appear to be for the same end, I find that the magic is not as stable as when you're focusing on a common thing together with the same steps. It does, and I think magic in numbers is great when it is focused correctly. My mind tends to wander, and when I think about magic in a political arena, I think my approach mentally has been wrong, because my mental approach is to want to affect the outcome for like the entire country. But what you're saying has a lot of wisdom, and to refocus it on just your immediate surroundings and the things you can protect is such a smarter use of my energy. And if I do that and everyone else does that, and we as pagans and witches, you know, take care of our own quote unquote, the rest of it will take care of it. Is that pretty much, am I getting it?
That's exactly what I'm talking about. The big group magical workings, that I won't even call them a group, the mass magical workings. Your energies are simply so they're so diverse. They're going toward different targets, and also you've got a lot of people working against you. 70 million people voted for Donald Trump. There's a lot of energy toward those type of goals, those type of things. They may not be explicitly magical, but energy is energy.
Right.
And there are some people who are working magic because they firmly believe that the country needs a good, strong fascist leader. I think we outnumber them, but we don't outnumber the total number of people who are putting energy toward these goals. So no, it's like trying to work magic to change a hurricane. Go for it. Makes you feel good. Give it a try, but don't skimp on your evacuation plans. Get out of the hurricane's way. So but where you can put your magical energies, your magical efforts, your spiritual practices, your prayers, your devotions, your offerings towards something very narrowly defined, you have a much, much, much better chance of seeing that manifest in the ordinary world.
Brilliant. Because I think a lot of us are just so concerned, when you look at things that have changed as far as Roe v. Wade and erosion of other rights and police brutality is on a rise, and I mean all of these things are happening, and there's more violence. I remember when it was shocking to have a mass shooting. Now we have them constantly, and it's like, oh, there's another one. This is not normal, and I think we're so adaptable as people that we keep normalizing the next worst thing. But if we stop focusing on trying to control that and trying to protect everything you can reach in a reasonable, narrowly focused and concentrated way, you stand a much better chance if we all do that, again, of affecting change so that we're insulated and your loved ones are insulated. Oh, it's such a smarter use of energy. Because I tend to get freaked out, John. I really do. As my friend, the pagan pundit, will tell anyone, Raina tends to get very nervous. He's constantly talking me off the political ledge because, I'm terrified that I'm going to die with things being worse than when I got here. Although Roe v. Wade wasn't even a law at that time. I mean, that I wasn't but 12 years old, 13 years old before Roe v. Wade became the law of the land. So, I do have this fear of things seemingly going backwards. But I guess it's cyclical, isn't it?
It is. It is cyclical, not in any sort of astrological cycles type of way, but just in a way that people have an idea about the way things ought to be, and the more you disrupt that, the more upset they get, and there are people who simply can't handle changes that we've seen over the last 50 years, and then there's of course people who are just hate-filled bigots. I don't want to excuse bigotry, because I know too many people who are way older than me who are as welcoming to to all forms of diversity. So
right.
You don't get a pass because you're old.
Right.
But I do understand that from a sociological standpoint, these things happen. The good news is the regressive political ideas tend to be concentrated in the older generations, and as they die off, they're replaced with people with more inclusive, more progressive ideas. So I like the odds long term. I don't like our odds short term.
Agreed. I agree with you. But that makes it even more important to be able to affect change where you can, which is in your own home, your own immediate surroundings, and the people you care for. Yeah, I could be spending my energy a lot better focusing on the things that I actually can affect instead of worrying about the things that I can't.
Okay, this is this is a problem for me, and I will freely admit it. I don't like the way things are going. Now, I live in Texas, which is, Texas and Florida are having a contest to see who can be the most regressive, hate-filled state in the country. And I've been here since 2001, and I always assumed that I'd just live out the rest of my life here. But, I could deal with the George W. Bush Republicans who I didn't like them, I didn't vote for them, but but they were, as long as you keep business happy, they were happy. But these culture warriors, they're bad for my blood pressure. Yeah. And I'm looking at leaving Texas after I retire in a few years.
Interesting.
Just for my own mental health. So people got to do what they got to do. Yeah.
I mean, that you're talking about an age of Republicans where they were, we may have disagreed on a lot of things philosophically, but it was a reasonable disagreement. It wasn't the making up of new facts to replace actual facts. It was a very different type of Republican Party. When you start longing for the days of George W. Bush, having gone through the years of Trump, that told me a lot, because my husband and I used to sit and say, oh, remember the days of George W. Bush? Yeah, those were good days compared to now, during the Trump era. So, yeah, I mean, everything is relative. I don't mind disagreeing philosophically if your disagreement is within normal parameters. But the minute and my mother is one of these fundamentalists, so I know what you're talking about as far as how you were raised. I was raised pretty much the same way. My mother had started out as a pagan, and then because of my father, converted and gave up paganism. Yeah, it's usually, the switch is usually the other way around, I know, but my family, everybody's insane. So, yeah. But, when you become a fundamentalist, not only do you drink the Kool-Aid, if you're like my mother, you help them stir the Kool-Aid. And when someone tells you that facts don't matter, because I've had a conversation with my mother trying to get her to explain to me all of the fabulous things Trump did, and she came up with nothing. And she's like, well, that doesn't matter. And I said, but here are facts. And she's like, well, the facts don't matter. When someone tells you facts don't matter, that conversation has ended. There is nowhere to go.
No, it's all about affirming. He hates the same people they hate.
Yeah.
He affirms their prejudices. He promises to make. He's the strong man who's going to make everything better. Only he can fix it. And the fact that he's shown time and time again he's only in it for himself is irrelevant. They've completely drank the Kool-Aid. But what are we going to do? We're going to be good citizens, good engaged citizens, and vote in every election.
Yep. Correct.
Especially vote in the primaries. That's the reason why we have such bad candidates, particularly on the Republican side, is that only a tiny handful of people vote in the primaries, and it's all the wingnuts who do it. Texas is an open primary state, and unless there's a really important race on the Democratic side, I vote in the Republican primary so I can vote for the lesser evil.
Right.
Because as bad as the people who get elected are, there's some out there who are worse. So
True.
Vote in every election. Make contributions where you can. If you're able to run for office, go for it. But then put your magic into taking care of you and yours, because that's where it will be the most effective.
So glad you said that. And I'm so glad you have also encouraged people to vote in every election. It's something I harp on quite often. So thank you for reinforcing that fact.
Every election, every race, especially school boards.
Yeah.
I spent a couple hours. We had a school board race here locally a couple months ago, and I spent 2 hours trying to figure out, okay, who's the honest Republican and who's the Trumper, and we kept the Trumpers out of office.
Fortunately, that's great. But you know what? I think the Trumpers at some point might wind up getting smarter about their tact, because as we've seen so far, these people don't know when to shut up. They're their own worst enemy, and it's almost laughable if it wasn't so frightening. But it is frightening, and that's just the truth of it. But yes, school board is how they first get into office. You're wondering how DeSantis got to the rise of power that he's at right now. These folks play a long game. They are willing to come in at the bottom, and not to promote this, but I watched a documentary about the Duggar family. And the Duggar family, it's called Duggar Family Secret. And while it's about the secrecy and the abuse committed by one of the brothers, it also goes much deeper to this fundamentalist organization that they follow and believe in, and I think it's IBLN. It's some organization where they raise their children, doing homeschooling, teaching them certain things. They put these kids in these little micro militias. They train their boys to basically be their own militia. The girls are there to basically have babies, and, they're building their own army. And this is how these people get into power. They want to, literally, they use the word infiltrate. So, and this is not conspiracy theory. This is all very researchable stuff. But this is how they affect change. This is how they get into offices. They start at the ground level, and they play the long game. And we've got to be just as smart. And we've got to not get militias necessarily, but we need to play a long game too. And we need to be willing to start at the ground level and infiltrate. They're so afraid of, these educated folks. And, I remember this, you brought up George W. Bush, and I remember the selling point on him was, he's the president you could have a beer with. I don't want a president I can have a beer with. I want a president that is so much smarter than me that I don't understand half the shit he's doing because it's so brilliant and way above my pay grade. I don't need to relate to my government officials. I need them to be smarter than I am. You need them to be smarter than you are, because that is how government should be run, with brains, not with a beer.
See, that's because you're somebody who is confident in your own intelligence, and you aren't threatened by people who are smarter than you are. But some people are. So
I love people that are smarter than me because I get to learn shit from them.
Yes,
that's why you're on the show, John. I learn shit from you, which is why you're on the show. You know, you gave me, listen, not for nothing. I'm just average, average witch, just trying to make a living and, get through without losing my mind with fear over the things I'm seeing. I'm no brainiac. Fuck. I mean, I'm the first to admit I don't know anything, much less everything. This is my chance before I die to learn as much as possible because time is fucking short. I'm in my 60s, John, and I know it. You know what I mean? So, yeah, this is the time to suck up all the learning I can before it's too fucking late. I would like to go out with a modicum of intellect and knowledge. So, yeah, this is why I have smart people on, because I don't know things and you need to teach me. And you already have in this hour. This whole thing about stop trying to affect change on such a huge scale that's so much bigger than what I can imagine. Listen, there's so many things at work in a political campaign, backers, all these things that have to happen for someone to run for office. How do I know what thing I should try to influence my magic on in such a large arena when there's so many cogs in the wheel? I do need to focus on my family and make sure that that's solid and protected from the noise outside. Maybe I won't lose my fucking mind if I do that. Just saying.
Again, we have skills that others do not. So it is, that something that came through in one of my preparations for rituals a few years ago was you're putting your trust in the wrong things. Now, again, we need to be engaged. We need to be engaged citizens. But if we count on government to save us, we are always going to be disappointed.
So true.
So don't put our trust in, again, be engaged citizens. Let's put our trust in our gods, in our ancestors, in our magic, in our local communities. These are the things that will save us. Again, I don't want to sound like a libertarian because I'm not, but government will fail you. Government will disappoint you. Your gods, your ancestors, your magic, your local community, those people will save you when you need help.
Very true. Very true. Well said, John. So, John, I want to move off from this topic because I understand that there's a new book out that I need to know about and that everybody needs to know about. What is happening?
There is a new book out. It is called The Book of Cernunnos. This is a new devotional anthology devoted to Cernunnos, the Lord of the Animals, the God of the Hunt, the Lord of the Wild. We know so little about him from history. His name appears only once in the record. There are no myths about him, and yet he has become one of the most popular gods of our era. And there are a lot of different devotional anthologies out there. There's one for the Morrigan and one for Hecate and one for the Dagda and probably a whole bunch of other deities who I'm overlooking at the moment. And Jason Mankey and I have been friends for a long time, and we are both followers of Cernunnos. And a few years ago, we both got the impression, it's time that Cernunnos had his own devotional anthology. So Jason and I edited this anthology. It has some of the writing is ours. Jason wrote more than I did, but it is the work of 32 different people. Some of the names you will recognize, like Dave the Bard and Evo Dominguez Jr. and Kirk Thomas, and some people you probably haven't heard of. And it has it's divided into 5 parts. The first section is on history and theology. We don't know a lot about Cernunnos from history, but we know a little bit, and we know how he's come to be seen and worshipped in the modern world. And then we have a section on meeting Cernunnos, people's stories of how they first encountered him and came to know him and understand him. And then we have a section on experiencing Cernunnos, people's love and devotion for this God. And then we have a section on poetry and a section on rituals. So two rituals to meet and honor Cernunnos. So it's as emotional devotional anthologies are. It's not a long book. It's 189 pages. It's published by ADF Publishing, Arnery Octane, the Druid Order, and it is printed by Amazon Print on Demand. So Amazon is the only place you can get it. We asked, Jason and I are both Llewellyn authors, and we asked Llewellyn to publish it, and they politely turned us down because there's not enough volume in devotional anthologies for somebody like Llewellyn to do a big print run. But because we have print-on-demand technology, something like this can make its way out into the world. And so it's off to a very good start. Let me find my notes here. As of this morning, it was Amazon's #1 in Wicca, #1 in paganism, and #3 in witchcraft, religion, and spirituality. So it's off to a good start.
Congratulations! That's really great. How long has it been live to order a copy?
Since it went live late last week, and we just announced it yesterday.
That's brilliant.
It took us
already
a while to
topping
our announcements together.
Wow, that's very impressive to be topping the charts basically just out of the gate. So many congratulations. That's really cool. But I want to ask you a question about Cernunnos. When you have a God that's not necessarily, when I say well written about, I mean written about often, from a historical standpoint, do you feel that this book at this time was inspired by him wanting his name out there more, or was this really a situation where, because sometimes I find that gods make themselves known in interesting ways. Oh, okay. So you do believe that this was him saying, "Hey, how about me now?"
This was Cernunnos has he's done very well with strictly by word of mouth.
Right.
So, but no, I think it was a case of him speaking to the people who are close to him and have been close to him and say, "It's time for my book."
Wow.
Not so much to spread his popularity, because that's happening as it is, but as a resource for the people who feel called to him, who are interested in him, who feel moved by him. I know there's some people in the pagan community who put a huge emphasis on scholarship and history and the stories of our ancestors. And, you know, the stories of our ancestors are treasures. And I'm so thankful that we have what we have, even what was written down by, you know, later by Christians who didn't believe anything about what they were writing, but it was an important story, so they wrote it down. So I'm so thankful we have that. But at the same time, all those stories had a beginning somewhere, and they begin with a God making themselves known to a human, and the human having a reaction, and the human deciding to write about it. And what our ancestors did then, we can do now. We have our own experiences of Cernunnos. We have our own experiences of Morrigan or of Brigid or of Hecate or of whoever. And, you know, we call that UPG, unverified personal gnosis, and if we are wise, we're rather humble about the authority we claim for these things, because, you know, there's always a chance you got it wrong. But, you know, if I hear something from Cernunnos, and Jason Mankey hears something very similar, and you hear something that's along those same lines, and all of a sudden we got 4 or 5 people who are hearing basically the same things, well, that gives us confidence that what we're hearing is accurate. It really is the same God speaking to us and telling us these same things. And so we get to a point where we start writing these things down, and if you read the book of Cernunnos, everybody's story is different, but you can find the common threads running through the stories to see that we're all experiencing the same God in somewhat different ways, and that's what our ancestors did all those years ago, and we can do it now.
Well, I think we're supposed to do it now because, and I know people hate it when I say this, but we are the ancestors of the future. So we better do something with it while we're here. You know, we better leave some kind of information behind for people to reference. Again, it's not that I feel like I have anything unique to say, but if it lends a voice to somebody else who's saying the same thing, and that lends its voice to somebody else who's thinking the same thing or hearing the same thing, it's confirmation that, you know, what we're feeling or hearing is actual and not just a group think situation, people who are all together all the time who, you know, start to vibe off of each other in the immediate. It's not like that. There are certain gods that seem to call lots of people from all over the place at once. You know, I liken it to during the pandemic where everybody wanted to talk about shadow work. Well, it was the most appropriate time to do it because most of us had time to actually do shadow work. Now, I thought I had done some shadow work. Oh, no. Oh, I thought I had been doing the work. I wasn't doing the work until a year and a half ago when my husband almost died. That's when I got deep. That's when my shit got real. Listen, I'm very honest with my audience. They know I'm a fuck up. They know I don't know much, and I come clean when I've learned a lesson. Oh boy, I thought I was doing shadow work. I didn't know shit. And that's just the truth. I knew nothing about going deep and real. I'm still digging through crap so buried that came up during him almost dying. I'm still not recovered. I'm still a mess a lot of the time, and I'm very honest about it because, honey, if I'm a mess, I'm not the only mess. I know that for a fact. We've all got something we're digging up and still working on. There is no shame in it. I'm not ashamed. I'm just glad that I still am here to work through it as much as I can, as fast as I can, which doesn't mean fast. It just means I recognize it, I'm accepting it, and I'm going through it. And I have, there are days that are harder than others for all of us, and there's no sin in that either. But again, going back to ancestral stuff, and when God called for your attention, again, like a few years ago, Lilith made a huge resurgence. Just talking about this last week. It's interesting how different deities will come up and say, hey, over here, you have forgotten about me over here, and it's my time to come to the fore for a while. I mean, do they take turns? Are they fighting for attention? Sometimes I wonder, because it's so strange to me how it happens in these large pockets. Have you noticed that, John?
Oh, goodness, yes. People ask me, how do you know it's a God talking to you and not just your own imagination? And one of the things is, if it's important enough, you're not going to be the only one.
Yeah,
it's going to be different. It's going to be different people. But I want to go back to something, and I just want to say how important it is for you and me as public pagans to be transparent about our own fuck-ups.
Oh yeah.
And to make it clear to people that we're working through these things the same as everybody else. And
absolutely.
Where people get into trouble is when they think that a teacher or an author or somebody has all the answers. They have their act together perfectly. Everything is fine with them,
right.
and nobody's life is like that. Everybody has to deal with crap. Some people deal with it better than others, and there are things I have learned particularly from some of the people I consider elders in the pagan community. I treasure Ivo Dominguez Jr.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
He is. I consider him, at the top of my list of contemporary pagan elders. So there's things that we can learn from. But I know Ivo would tell you, he doesn't have all the answers.
Absolutely, he's such a good person.
He's such a good person, and unfortunately, not everybody in the movement is a good person. So,
right.
Anytime somebody tells you they have all the answers, that you just need to listen to them, don't walk away, run away.
Yeah, I'm very leery of people who announce themselves in such a way that it's almost as though they're telling you to kiss the ring. I don't kiss the ring for anybody except the people I consider elders. Evo would be one of them. Dorothy Morrison would be another one. I mean, there are the people that have gone before me that paved the way so that I could have this podcast for the past over 11 years, who have been kind to me when I was first starting and came on to speak with me. I've been really fortunate, really, really, really fortunate to still be doing this over 11 years later. So, I mean, I count those blessings all the time.
Yes.
I mean, I'm very lucky. And I try to remember my gratitude. Gratitude is such an important part of my life because I've come from a place of not having. I've come from a place of being abused. I've come from a place of being abused by a spouse and being on welfare and not having anything to my name and wondering how I was going to feed my babies. I mean, I've been through some typical shit, just like everybody else. I'm lucky I have survived it. I have come out on the other side. I'm older now. I've got a very nice life that I worked really hard for, and it's just another story in all of our stories. I am not fucking special by any stretch of the imagination. I just like to talk, and I got a big mouth. But, John, I got to say, I'm so glad you finally were able to, make time for me. And I'm glad.
I'm so glad you invited me, because this has been fun.
Of course, it has, and you're going to be invited again. As a matter of fact, speaking of being invited again, John is going to be speaking at Mystic South. As a reminder, I will be doing my podcast from Mystic South, of course. Mystic South is in July in beautiful Atlanta, Georgia, and we want to see all of you there, of course. But I'm also doing an early show, a pre-show, on that Thursday, the day before Mystic South actually begins, because there's a bunch of folks who are giving classes on Friday morning and Friday afternoon. Typically, my Friday night show is still going to happen, but I also wanted to give folks who are speaking on Friday morning the opportunity to come and hang out and talk about their classes before they actually give them. So I've got a great roster of folks coming up on that Thursday, the day before Mystic South. And again, of course, I'll be doing the regular show on Friday. But, John, for folks who may not have a chance to come and see you live at Mystic South, tell folks again how to get the new book and where they can find you for classes and your blog and more wisdom.
Okay, so the Book of Cernunnos is only available through Amazon. It's an Amazon print-on-demand book, so that's where you find it. As for me, my website is undertheancientoaks.com. That's my teaching site where I teach online classes. I've got a free weekly newsletter that you can sign up for. My Patheos blog is also called Under the Ancient Oaks. If you'll Google John Beckett Patheos, John Beckett Under the Ancient Oaks, it'll take you right to both of those locations. You can find me on most social media. I'm most active on Facebook, but I'm also on Twitter and Instagram. I have a YouTube channel. Don't do much with it. I will tell you, if you send me a Facebook friend request, also send me a private message telling me who you are and how you know me, just enough to to convince me that you're not a scammer or a bot. I will be happy to accept. So I'm around the internet and pretty easy to find.
John, thank you again so much for coming on and hanging out with me for the last hour. It's been a treat, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in a few weeks, and we'll set up another date when we're together. How's that?
Sounds wonderful.
All right. John, thank you again. Have a wonderful, wonderful weekend, and I will talk to you soon.
Very good. Thanks.
Thanks. All right, guys, that's it for tonight. I will be back on Thursday with Daniela Cinema. I'm very, very excited about that. And next Saturday, I will be speaking with Vinnie Higginbotham and Martha Capo Kirby. And it's going to be about thrifty witchery on that show. So I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. Please support any Juneteenth events going on in your neighborhood. I have one down the street tomorrow that I'm going to. Very excited. Love you guys. Talk to you later, Desperados.